All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining the Sugar Maple Storytelling online gathering. I appreciate everybody joining us tonight. So we're going to be hearing tonight from seasoned harvesters Marvin Defoe, Greg Johnson, and Maria Novella on stories, concerns, and teachings to guide the care of Inanatig, or the sugar maple in the Ojibwe language. Unfortunately, JD Lemieux who was originally supposed to join us tonight, is not going to be able to make it. But the speakers will introduce themselves soon to share a little bit about their project. I'm sorry, the speakers are going to introduce themselves soon, and I'm just going to introduce like our project first. So I am the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Outreach Specialist, and I'm a member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior Chippewa. And I work on the RPI Indigenous Food Systems Resilience Project, which is a partnership between the University of Wisconsin-Madison and tribal nations and organizations in Wisconsin that support tribal producers, land managers, and communities in their food sovereignty work. So we also, an initiative of the RPI project is the Tribal Maple Sugaring Network. And this is to support tribal maple producers and advance tribal food sovereignty by strengthening culturally grounded, community-led maple sugaring practices. And the network focuses on uplifting small-scale and tribal producers through peer-to-peer learning, relationship-centered outreach, and culturally responsive technical support. And so by fostering these connections, tribal nations expanding learning opportunities, and we can prioritize community identified needs. So I am sort of in charge of the Tribal Maple Sugaring Network. And then just because you guys are on this webinar, you have all been added to the list. So you will receive information on upcoming events and other resources that are available for sugaring. And then I would also like to introduce our co-leads of the project, which is Trisha Gorby and Dan Cornelius, and then also Hannah McIntosh, who is our project manager. And this online gathering is hosted in partnership with the Wisconsin Tribal Conservation Advisory Council. Through our partnership with them, Jeff Mears, who is the executive director, and Glyphwick was also a hosted partner for this. So they were able to help put this together. So the goal of this online gathering is to get our tribal partners and producers to gather together to share stories, concerns, and guidance on maple sugaring practices before the season begins. So while the hour will be spent with questions directed towards our speakers, we're going to have a half hour at the end for participants to ask questions and open discussion for all participants to weigh in. So without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce Marvin Defoe, Greg Johnson, and Maria Novella. And I'll let you each introduce yourself and tell everyone where you're coming from and what your connection to maple sugaring is, and then we can move into the more specific questions. So I'm not sure who wants to start out. Maybe Greg, would you mind starting us off?
Sure. Bonjour. Gakinawea, Biskakune, Njindakas, Waswagan, Shikanagan, and Dunjaba. My English name is Greg Johnson. My Ojibwe name is Biskakune. I come from the Lactaflambo tribe in north central Wisconsin. And I've been doing sugaring for probably about 20, 25 years now. I first got into it with one of my niejas. He invited me over to his house, and I mean, there's always been sugar and syrup around, but um, I started out by just chopping wood for him, so and just doing a lot of hard labor, and then it became I started having children a few years after I started sugaring, and it became an important part of our diet at home. And so that's kind of how I started out in the beginning of sugaring, and it's really important to me and my family, so and my community. So when we make sugar, it's gifted out at ceremonies and a lot of things like that. So that's where I started, and that's kind of how I use it, and that's a little bit of who I am. So thank you for having me here.
Thanks, Greg. Marvin, do you want to go next?
Ya, bonjour. Cinque Benes, Disney cause. Uh, my clan is Sturgeon Gatiname, and I live by Lake Superior, the southern part of Lake Superior community. My home called Godmasquabi Kong, a place that has red cliffs. And I've been kind of working with the maple tree probably all my life, even when I was younger. I used to help out the top trees, and we can go more into that later. But I'm very honored, very honored, glad to be here to speak to the folks that are certainly online. I've been looking curious where everybody was from. Welcome, welcome, welcome to listening to the stories. You're talking about maple tree. I mean, if you're on there, you must like syrup, or you must like the idea of getting sap from a tree and sustaining our lives for that. Well, I'm also honored to be sitting next to. Well, I'm not sitting. I'm in my other room here, but our other speakers, Greg. Greg, a good friend of mine, and Marie Nevela. Looking forward to sitting with you, and I hope we can do a good job. I mean, Greg, when we first started, he asked everyone what's the weather like, you know? So right here in Red Cliff, you can see behind me. I'm so far goddamn north there, you can see the northern lights. You see that? See? That's how north I am. And it's kind of, and I know why Greg asked that because that's an indicator with the syrup, but we always ask that, well, how's that weather there? I got friends down in Iowa, you know, what are you guys doing down there? They usually start tapping trees about 3 weeks before we do here in our community. But I want to give everybody a warm welcome. Looking forward to tonight's discussion with a very sacred tree, a special tree that Niniatik, a very special tree to all of us, not just to Shinabe, but it's a special tree to everyone on the earth. So miigwech.
Miigwech Arvin. Maria, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Bonjour, everyone. My name is Maria Navala. Uh, my given name is Bejik Ikwe. Stands for one woman. And I kind of got into maple syrup because I thought it was what everybody did. I didn't know that it was something that other families didn't do it. It was something that I thought it was what we did as far as a family. Um, and so I don't know if I want to say how long I've been doing this. Over 50 years I've been doing working in the sugar bush. And like Marvin said, it has it has been wonderful. I love it. I look forward to it every year. And that's about it, I guess.
Thanks, Maria. Okay, well, we can get into the first question for you all to answer, which is how were you taught about maple sugaring and the practices that go along with it? Who were the people, places, or moments that shaped your learning? Um, I don't know if anybody wants to jump up and answer it first, or if we want to just keep going around in order.
Let's go in the order like we introduced ourselves. Yeah.
Sounds
Right,
good,
I mean,
Marvin. Let's do that. All right, Greg, do you mind answering that first? I'll ask it one more time here. So, how were you taught about maple sugaring and the practices that go along with it? And who were the people, places, or moments that shaped your learning?
Yeah, so it was probably I'd say 25 years ago around there somewhere. Um, one of my friends came over and he said, can you help me split some wood, you know? So I said, yeah, okay. So I go over to his house and here I was expecting a little pile, and this pile was bigger than I was, and it was probably, I don't know, 14 truckloads of maple there. So I was like, what did I get myself into here, you know? And so I noticed my friend was over there and he was boiling down and he kind of introduced me to it that way because I've never really cooked it down like that, you know. And his name is Leon Valier. And so he put me to work right away on that, you know. And the first day I was cutting wood, and second day he said, "Hey, I gotta go do my class." He said, "Can you watch this pan? Make sure it doesn't boil over." And I was like, "Oh man, I don't know if I can do that, you know. I don't know if you want to leave me with that, you know." So then he kind of gave me a little idea on how to make sure it doesn't boil over, you know. So there's a couple little tricks they used. Uh, Sometimes they would use Bimide, and sometimes they would use a little splay of a branch of a evergreen. And so we had those things sitting around. And so he left, and it was successful because I didn't let it boil over too much, you know. And then just over the years, we made a lot of different types of boiling pans. You know, we had one that we called the Starship Enterprise. It was a water holding tank, and my friend's brother, he took a torch and cut it in half, and it was this big round water holding tank, and it was welded onto a little frame, and it had a little door on there, and then we would put our wood in there. And I think it would get red hot. It would look like when the U.S. Enterprise goes through warp speed, you know. So that's why we call it the Enterprise, you know. And so we had a lot of different methods of boiling down from the main pan to the smaller pans. And I learned from him. And after we'd make syrup, we'd get all of our syrup all lined up, and then we'd cook it down in sugar. Very seldom did we make syrup. You know, it was always sugar. And so over the years, we've carved many different types of molds. We used the rubber ones you could buy online, and we've made some out of oak and maple, and we use birch bark too. We would make birch bark cones. We'd fill those up with maple sugar, and then we'd have basswood cordage on the end, and we'd hang those up, you know. And you know, like a lot of other camps, there's downtime where you're kind of just sitting around waiting for that fire to reach its peak and get your boil down right, you know. So there was a lot of stories and a lot of teasing going on, and you know, we'd have visitors, we'd have people from our language class come out, and it was always really a really good time to do that, you know, to sit and learn from each other and show people how to do it and show people how to make sugar, you know, just by sight. Today, a lot of people use thermometers and machines and mixers, but the way I learned how to do it was over a fire, you know, with a little pan and just by sight and smell. And so that's how I learned. I learned from my friend Leon, you know. He's very experienced in that area. So I give all my knowledge and credit, and when I share and when I teach, I always make sure that people know that that's where I learned it from. And now me and my daughter, we get to travel around and we get to show people about making sugar and doing it how the old people did long ago. And so those are that's kind of where I started, you know. I mean, I could talk for days, but I'm just like Marvin, I could just keep going, but I gotta give somebody else a chance.
Thanks,
Anyway,
Greg. Which Marvin, you can go ahead and answer.
yeah,
Um, Yeah, the question was just, people, places, or moments that shaped your learning, with your, how you were first learned maple sugaring.
I got introduced to sugaring and tapping trees up from my grandfather Butterfield, and making sure boiling sand. And I asked her, how come you like making maple syrup? He said, because I like pancakes. You know, my grandpa, he did pancakes every day. His name was Lawrence Butterfield. He lived out in a place called Settlement where I grew up. And 10 years old, going up to his house and watching him, and maybe haul a pail once in a while and here and there. And next year, I get a little older, maybe do a little more work and help him with the wood and so forth. And that's how I kind of got introduced to tapping trees and the area of making the syrup. And my grandpa, he passed away. When he passed away, of all the things that I wanted from my grandpa, you know, you get passed down. He had this little ladle. He had this ladle. It was a little aluminum ladle, and he had it bolted together with a big handle. With a big handle. I mean, that was my pride and joy. Pride and joy of my grandpa making syrup, making syrup. He would ladle that, and I treasured that, and I treasured. I guess like all people, doing something, or maybe even doing the sugaring. There's something to connect, something you would connect with, and that was my grandfather. Of course, there's other people that I go around and helped them with the sugar bush. Here in Red Cliff, there's a family, we call it the Nawago Sugar Bush. Way out in the woods, you gotta walk about a mile to get out there, a cabin out there. And my good friends of mine, Keith and George and Peter, I used to go out there and help out with his dad, Sammy Nawago, and call him Mike Nawago. And them guys were tough. They're old timers, tough. I remember one year, Sammy, they tapped 500, they put out 500 taps. And all they had at that time was these little old coffee cans, to collect the sap. Never had no metal spouts. They'd sit there and make their own spouts, their own spout out of either maple or sumac, or make their own spouts to put in there. I helped them for many years doing that. And they kind of, I think what I learned there taught there was, when you do a sugar bush, you got to work hard. That's hard work. I mean, you know, you got to be at it. So when we had them little cans, holy Christ, we go collect 500 tap twice a day. Carrying your sap. I mean, the hard part is carrying sap on snowshoes. When there's 5 feet of snow, holy crap, that's work, and that's hard work. So I did a lot of time with that, and then me and George, worked with George Nalago doing that, and we didn't know how to make sugar. We want to, we eat a lot of syrup, but we got a hold of what's his name, Gaspagas from the Coudray. He was chairman. That he said, "I'll come up there and teach you guys how to make sugar." So he came up for about a week. Every day we made sugar. Every day we made sugar. Every day we made with a spoon make it. And we learned learned how to, and we got a few secrets out of him. A few methods, like Greg said, you got to see it with your eye, kind of how it is. You got to know what it looks like, but there's different methods you can use. We don't use that thermometers and stuff either. I don't. I tried it, and I burnt my sugar up. You know, you just use your eyes. So there's teachers, people who taught you, whenever I go around, they don't even some of them when they're boiling sap, I go to different villages or different places. I'm really watching how they do things, watching how they make that. So there's many people, and that taught and inspired me to do that, and I hope I can inspire others too, inspire kids, inspire the young people, other people, and that's kind of what we do. That's kind of what we do. We lend out equipment for the community if they want to tap uh, their sugar bush. If they want to do that, we got equipment, taps, this, even a boiler, even a boiler. I got a boiler outside here now. We got community members maybe that don't have a boiler. Let's work together. Let's work together, and we'll boil together. So there's many things with that, and it's kind of like I like to pay it back. Pay it back is what you're given. So it gets very special. That's a very special gift to be able to boil sap. So I learned to kind of be like my grandpa because I like pancakes too. You know, I'll get up in the morning, crazy, even at nighttime, I'll make pancakes and pour that syrup and sugar, but there's nothing better. I like sugar better than syrup. I like sugar. I said one year, one year I must have had 10 pounds, maybe 15, 20 pounds of sugar. And what the heck am I going to do with all that sugar? Well, I gave some away. So every day I take a spoon in there. Take about 3 spoons of sugar. Every day. Boy, I just love that maple sugar. But when spring, I did that all winter. But when spring came, I looked down at my belly. And my belly was getting a little bigger from eating all that maple sugar, you know. But it's good for you. Sugar, maple sugar is really, really good for you. And there used to be people around Redcliffe, and they used to use that syrup. Maybe if they were diabetic, they'd use that syrup, and they say, "Well, that doesn't affect me as much as that white sugar or whatever." So I said, "Oh, okay." So, so there's many benefits benefits from sugar, and or the syrup. It's really good in coffee in the morning too. So with that, I'd say me glitch. That's kind of a little bit that kind of shaped my learning. Me glitch.
Yes. Thank you, Marvin. Maria, you are next. I'll just repeat the question here. How were you taught about maple sugaring and the practices that go along with it? Who are the people, places, or moments that shaped your learning?
Well, I really have nothing to say because Greg and Marvin said everything. Didn't save me anything to teach anybody. But I learned from we're five generations. And so my great grandma, I learned from her. And she was a Dashner. And we're quite close with Redcliffe. Can go back even a couple more years. And they lived on Madeline Island. And I wouldn't doubt it if I'm related to Marvin Defoe somehow. Uh, and so, like I said, I probably started at 4 or 5 years, maybe even younger. And like Greg, I didn't so much chop the wood, but I had to haul it. And Marvin was lucky. He had snowshoes. We didn't have that. So we had to trudge. And when you're only, 3.5 feet tall, we'd get lost in the snow. Um, Not too bad. And so then we kind of graduated. They would give a little handsaw and we would cut up for the taps. And we used sumac. not oak or maple, but we used sumac. And there was a lot that grew on the river. I grew up on Bear Trap, and there was Bear Trap Creek there. So there was a lot of sumac. So, and if I remember correctly, I didn't have a saw. They gave me like a steak knife, and it would take me forever to try to cut through that and get through that sumac. But then we would whittle, or actually my uncles would whittle. And in the sumac, there's a soft core. It kind of looks like peanut butter. And so we would take and heat up large nails and slowly burn the inside of the sumac out. And how we carried it out was what they had said. We had coffee cans and milk jugs. And so we would pour it into a 5-gallon bucket and then haul that back. And of course, I was a little bit older at that time. And we had like a cow trough. I don't, and we would dump that in there. So when my uncles were sitting around the fire BSing, we were out doing the work. And so they had the sap there for them to just stand up, grab, and pour it in the pan. And like Greg said, they welded. We had probably a pan that was completely square and maybe 5 by 5. And to keep that straight, they would dig out the ground frozen with concrete blocks and use a level to get our pan leveled. Because if it's crooked, you have one side that burns more, and you can end up burning it, the syrup. And I kind of was going to tell a story, Marvin, but you ruined it. I was going to tell about how I walked a mile to the Nawago Sugar Bush, and I learned a lot from them as well. Uh, and but I do have one thing to say that Marvin forgot to say. So the Nawagos and the Foes are a little bit competitive, and when it was done with the season, every year one would have to make they would say, "Oh, I made 10 quarts." And Marvin would come in and say, "Well, I made 10 quarts in a pint." So Mar Marvin always made just a little bit more. Never
Yeah.
a gallon, but just a little bit more. So that was always a treat to see who made the most. And Marvin would always win.
Yeah.
At least he thought he did
Yeah,
anyway.
with George, I'd always win. If
Yeah.
he's listening.
Yeah. And so the Nawagos taught me a lot of things later in life. And I'll get to that later with maybe the other questions that you have. But a big influence in my life was my great grandma and my grandmother. And they kind of did the end of the season. They would bottle up the syrup. They would, divide the sugar up. But I was fortunate, I was lucky, and I had 9 great uncles who were out there, and we were always tapping. And so we always had like 501 taps out. And of course, it was the we had old hand drills, so we would have to go out there and do the hand drills. Um, But we had the same thing. We had coffee cans, we had milk jugs. And when the trees were running, it was, 2 or 3 times that we would have to go out there and pick up that sap. Um, I think it was maybe even 3 times, a little bit more than Marvin. I'm not sure how many times Greg had to pick up, but no, I'm just teasing because these guys didn't really give me anything to talk about because they talked
Yeah.
about it all, talked about it all. So I'll wait till the next question. I'm sure I'll have something that, our family has done that they
You
haven't.
gotta
But
have Maria go first next time. Next question.
nope, I'm gonna stay at the end here.
Are you?
I am.
Okay.
I
Okay,
gotta,
well, I was just about to suggest, Maria, if you want to answer the next question
Well,
first.
yeah, and I would say ladies first too, right? I always go by that.
Exactly.
Ladies first. So there you go, Maria.
no, it's always our elders first. That's one teach, and the elders go first, and then
I
the
knew
young
you.
ones.
I knew you were going to say that.
So, uh, I don't know who's older between Marvin and Greg, but
I
I'm
think
younger.
Greg. I think Greg is. I'm only 43.
Yeah, it's definitely Marvin.
All right. Well, okay. Then on that, we can start with Marvin, and then maybe we'll switch up the rotation after that,
There you
and
go.
Maria can go after. So,
Right.
yeah, I think we'll get right into it. Are there any stories or traditional or personal that come to mind when you think about maple sugaring and your relationship with the sugar maple?
Well, yeah. Always. There's always a lot. We could tell you all kinds of all kinds of stories and experiences. But this time of year, you begin thinking about that. The weather's getting a little warmer, and man, is it time? I thought it was almost ready to tap last week. Holy crap, it got up 37, 40 degrees. And I almost went out there and tapped some trees. One time I went out with January 11th, and it was warm. I want to see if these trees will run. So I went out there and I put 4 taps in the tree, and guess what? They ran. I got bottom of the cans about this much. January 11th, and that was uh, 12 years ago or so. So there's many, many stories, and we have we have what we call Atasokan stories, and that's stories about spirits and how we do that. I'm not really comfortable telling them stories on here, but part of them stories. Certainly, there's many of them, many stories that we could tell. What kind of sticks in my mind is, you know, doing sugar bushing, doing any of that. You gotta work. We said that you can't be lazy. You can't be lazy with that. And one time people were lazy, and the creator, seeing that the people were lazy because that syrup, you break the branch off that tree, and the syrup would come right out the tree. So let's land down there, break a branch, and that syrup come in your. You didn't have to work for it. So the creator, he didn't like that. He liked the people. So he went and he poured water in the tops of the trees and kind of diluted that syrup, and said, "Well, from now on, you got to work. you got to you got to work for the syrup. You got to work for what's good." So I think that's a good teaching for anyone. Either you're Shinabe or you're not Shinabe, or you're from Pontiac, Michigan, or wherever you are. You gotta work, and that's one of the teachings with sugar bushing is it applies to everything in your life. Not just sugar bush time. You got to really work for what you need, what you want, and so forth for that. The tree, any Arctic man tree, and Nini is man. Nini Arctic, it's a man tree, and there's way back in time, life, son of gut. Sometimes life is tough. Life gets tough sometimes. Sometimes I don't know if anybody's gone without eating or any food, maybe haven't had any food, whatever with that. But that Arctic gave that gift to us. And that's the syrup to sustain our life. So that's why it was a very special gift And I kind of find it, you know, it is some people, I hear people they tap trees. They say, well, I've had enough. I've had enough. I'm going to pull all my taps out. You know, I don't do that. You know, I don't do that. I just wait because that's a gift that that tree has given you. I kind of wait until that tree says, "Hey, I'm done." You know, the creation says, "Hey, I'm done. You had enough now. This is what you take." 'Cause I remember years. One year I only went out. There was 2 days only that them trees ran. 2 days, and on that third day, I went and collected sap, and it was 80 degrees out, and I was in shorts. You know, so you don't know what's up ahead. So that's what I always follow. I always follow. I mean, last year I got worn out because that goddamn tree ran for about a month. You know, for last year, 6 weeks. You know, it ran a long time. So, but I try to respect that. I try to respect that tree in any optic. You know, if you're gonna give, you know, give it. And I'm taught. I'm taught to. Uh, when somebody gives you something, you be very respectful and you receive that. You receive that in a good way. Or you go to somebody's house, even though you ate, you go to visit somebody, you ate at your house and your belly is still full and they offer you some food. You know, eat it, take it. And don't be afraid to accept that gift. That's what I kind of look at that tree, a tree like that. And that's kind of taught me with the many traditional stories or stories we have, you know, have with that. And that's one of the things I wanted to share too. When COVID came, COVID that year, COVID, I made syrup. I told my wife, in the spring, I said, "Holy Christ! Look at all that syrup we got. Look at all that syrup in there." And usually this time of year, I usually this time of year I don't have syrup because I give it all away. Either you know, I give it away, go to ceremonies, you give it away, and it's not meant. It's not meant just for yourself. You know, you got to take care of people in your community. I had elders come right out to my house. They come every single year, and this one couple comes out to my house, and I know what they wanted. You know, at the end of your boiling, you get that real dark. Sometimes it's almost black syrup. That's what they wanted. So I go out there and give them a gallon of that. They love it. The only reason they love it because they use that dark syrup and they put them in their baked beans. They put them in there. They make their baked beans. So there's many different things. Different things on it, just like fishing. You know, this time of year, if you're fishing, you probably shouldn't have any fish in your freezer from last year. If you do, you better think ahead, maybe give away a little more. You know, there's a lot of people in our community that don't practice this. So that's why I want to emphasize, you know, don't be afraid to give people some of that syrup. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Marvin. We will go to Maria next. Are there any stories, traditional or personal, that come to mind when you think about maple sugaring and your relationship with Inanoptic? I think you're on mute. All right, there you go.
Once again, Marvin took everything. Jeez. Some of the stories that I have was growing up, like I said, on Bear Trap. My uncles would cut down trees, and we would have to walk across those trees to get to the other side. And they always made us kids do that. And the water and the ice would be kind of breaking up and flowing because it's, you know, spring and it's getting warm. And it just sticks out. I was crossing that tree and I had my buckets filled with sap, and an otter came out of the ice, and that otter kept sliding and then coming back up and coming back out. And I was so like enthralled that I got to see that otter, and that otter came out of the ice and it just stared at me, and it was like such a gift, and it just kind of reminded me that we can't take without giving back. And that's an important part of I just remember that was one of the best stories I had. The other one was I talked about some great uncles, and they would laugh, they would joke, and they would say some probably naughty things, joking that I didn't understand. And now I get them. But they were amazing too. And one of the stories that they would sit and talk about is every single one went to the war and every single one came back. And so they had a hard life. And like Marvin said, it's hard. It's hard work to get out there and start from start to end. But when I got to hear them stories, that was that was hard. And so when they came back to do sugar, that was easy for them. They were able to carry and start to finish. And how grateful that I had great uncles to teach me what I have learned and have passed on. I wanted to tell the story about Marvin and the Nawagos, and he hit it on the head. The Nawagos learned that from LCO, that the making the sugar. And so I was invited out to their sugar bush, and we sat around, and George and Keith, they I got that teaching. And there was no thermometer back then, and it was big bubbles, frothy, and I can't. They gave all sorts of names, and for me to try to learn how the bubbles and what to look for so there was the right temperature. And I think at that time they were kind of teasing, and they had a carved birch stick, real heavy birch stick. And I think, Marvin, you actually carved one and gave it to me because I have one. There was a little crook in that birch tree, which made it stronger at that point so it wouldn't break. So Marvin was involved in some of the learning I had as well. But they did teach me how to make sugar, and they were not not Marvin wasn't that mean, but oh my gosh, we would sit, and Keith and George were like, "You're going too slow. You're making taffy. Hurry up!" And so I would turn that bucket. Me and my girlfriend, we would turn that big pan, and we'd grab the syrup from one side, and then as it started to turn to make sugar, George would be yelling, "Turn it! You're not going fast enough. Turn it, turn it!" And so that that is hard work. I think all the other stuff, carrying the wood and picking up the sap, that was easy. But to make sugar, that takes some muscle and that takes a lot of time. And over the years, I think I've lost some friends because I'd say, "Hey, you want to make some sugar with me?" Yeah. And after we got done, their arms were spent. They were sweating. The steam from the sugar would come up and the syrup. And when I ask someone if they want to come make some sugar with me, they're kind of like, not really. So I'll guess I'll let Greg talk. I don't want to take all the time up here.
Miigwech, Maria. That's funny. Yeah, Greg, you're up next, so I can just repeat the question real quick. Are there any stories, traditional or personal, that come to mind when you think about maple sugaring or your relationship with InnoNautic?
Yeah, for sure. I like listening to what they had to say because it is a lot of work. Um, all the great things that Anishinaabe have require a lot of concentration, a lot of teachings, and a lot of elbow grease. Okay, so you think about all the wood you have to get ready for your maple sugar camp. That's all work. And then sitting there for hours and making sure it doesn't boil over, that's work. And then making the actual sugar, that's a lot of work. And so that's work right there. That's what that but that's only one little part of the year. And then later on, we have making baskets. If you ever made a birch bark basket, you got to go out there and you got to face the Zuggy Meg. You got to go get wood ticks, azaga. You got to get all these things to make that stuff for your baskets. Same with mats, cedar mats that we make. We got to go in these swamps where there's just a lot of mosquitoes and it's hot. It's a lot of work. And then making manoman is a lot of work. And like Marvin does, and what we do over here, we make wigwasi jiman. We make birch bark canoes. If you ever want to know what work is, do that too. It's just like sugaring. It's a lot of work. And then hunting and trapping and ice fishing and all our best stuff is work. Okay, so we know that, and we fill our seasons, our year up. We look ahead to those things. Like already looking ahead to sugaring, and we're already looking ahead to spearing. And I hear these young guys in our community are all excited about spring spearing. And I had one guy, one of my friends from Chicago, he called me up today, and he's from here, but he'll come up here in the springtime and he'll tap those trees. That's how much he loves those trees and that sugar. And so that sugar is a gift, okay? And it's always there. It's always in our calendar. And I remember, um, it's kind of like Marvin, there's sacred stories that go with that. And I personally don't feel comfortable talking about those sacred stories online because, there's a lot of things can be heard the wrong way when we tell those things, and or people will try to do something with that information and it's not theirs yet. So we have to be careful of what we say. But I remember one time we had one of our elders, and so I'll tell a personal story, something that really sticks out. So we do these ceremonies here in Flambeau, and there's one of our elders. He had lost his wife, and he loved his wife. He was a World War II veteran, and he was at Normandy, and when he was over there, he drank from mud puddles, and he had a really rough life. And he was one of our language teachers here. His name was Oza Wabik, and so um, he had a hard life during the war. And when he came back, he made a life with his partner, and he really loved his wife. For many, many, many decades, they were together. They were inseparable. And one year he lost his wife. It was that winter. I think it was the fall before our sugaring season. He lost his wife, and boy, was he depressed. He was in a bad area of his mind. But in order to lift that mourning off somebody, we have to have a little ceremony. And sometimes we'll do that in our dance hall or whatever. But our teacher there, he told us, yeah, um, he told one of our other people, go get Oza Wabik and bring him out here, and we'll have some food for him. And we're like, well, what are we gonna cook for him? We looked around, and I said, hey, I got some fresh walleyes I just speared out of the river in the back of my truck. I said, why don't we send Bagwajin and Bernie Dowd? We'll go have him go get Oza Wabik. And so he drove over to Oza Wabik, and you don't say nothing, you just say, get in the car, you're coming with me. So that old man jumped in Bernie's car, and in the meantime, I was chefing up the walleye out there for his feast, his the end of morning feast. And so I didn't have any cooking oil. I didn't have anything, but I had this pan we were cooking sugar down in. Okay. So what I did was I poured a little water in there, and I think we had some Wawash Geishi Bimide, a little bit of that deer oil for the for the pan at our camp. So I put a little bit of that in there, just to have a little oil in there. So I started cooking those fish up in that our sugaring pan, and it had sugar cake all around on the inside of it. So I had first time I ever cooked the fish like that, I had no idea what I was doing. And so Ozawabik shows up and we sit him down and we go through our ceremony and we wind up giving him a plate of that. And what happened was that sugar caramelized right onto that walleye fillet. And it was the most amazing piece of fish you would have ever eaten in your life. And so we gave that to him and we gave that to everybody around there to release that morning from our elder. And I looked over at my friend Bernie and he was sitting there and he had that plate and it was so funny. He was sitting there like this and you could see there was just a little bit left there. And all that sugar and fish was all over his face and we were laughing. I said, Bernie, is that good? And he's like, oh, Bascockane, that was the best fish I ever had in my life, he said. And I looked over at Joe and Ozawabik and I said, how was that fish, Joe? He said, wow, he said, I never had anything like that. And so he was lifted from his morning with that sugar and that walleye. And that's how important that was. So later on, ever since then, I've tried to recreate that dish. I can't do it. I don't know what I did to make it work. So that what I'm getting at is the sugar is there. It's just like our tobacco. Our tobacco is there our whole life. Wild rice is there our whole life. When a baby's born, their first food is maple sugar or it's wild rice. Okay. And then in the end, the last food they're going to get before they're sent off is maple sugar and wild rice. Okay. And tobacco is in there somewhere. So all of those things are important. And so even though sugar is here at the beginning of the year and Monoman is here at the end of the year, those things are always together. You go to any reservation and people, they'll be making their Monoman and they'll dump sugar or put syrup in there. And they love that. And so it's really important to understand the relationship of all the things that we have, all 4 seasons, because it's there for us as Anishinaabe people. And I wanted to talk about that morning that our elder was in and how that happened for him. And that was a real important thing for me to see that and grow with that. The other thing too is I remember when I was married to my ex-wife, we were out and we ran out of coffee cans for our yard. And so what I did was, and she didn't know this, but I went into her Tupperware container and I used all of her Tupperware to catch the sap. And I used a drill and I hung it on those biwabako negwakwan, those metal spiles. And I was using her Tupperware. And when I was done, I rinsed it all out and I put it back in the cabinet. And she pulled it up one day and she's like, Christ's sakes, why is there holes in all my Tupperware? She said, and I was sitting there, I was like, oh man, I forgot to tell her about that, but that I took her Tupperware and put those holes in there. But that was another funny thing I wanted to talk about, something that I remembered. And then I guess the last thing I want to talk about is that life of that tree. Okay, that tree is really important, especially to people that are into making their own food. Okay, because we use that sugar that Anishinaabe is in Bakud. We use that for baking when we make bread, and then we use it for everything. That sugar is really important. But that maple tree its whole life is important. Okay, so I want everybody to remember this. When that tree is small and it's a little sapling, when it's red, that's a really heavy medicine. It's really, really good for our people that aren't doing good mentally. Okay. And then as that tree grows, it grows into a sapling and it's getting ready to produce sap for our Anishinaabe people. And as that tree matures, it gets bigger and for year after year, for decades, that tree it'll produce lots of lots of sugar for our people and syrup. And science tells us that it draws all these wonderful things from the ground and it gets deposited into that wood. And every year that tree grows out another ring and another ring and another ring. So all those micronutrients are stashed inside of that tree from the bottom all the way up. And that water, when it comes up, it deposits that into those rings. And so what you have is you have this tree that has all these minerals all throughout the whole tree from when it's a sapling all the way till when the wind or when the tornadoes or whatever blow it over. Then we go there and we cut it with our saw. And people think that's the end of that tree once we burn it. But what we do is, especially people that grow our corn, we use that as our ash and we get our lye from that so we can lye our hominy. Okay. And so one thing I want to talk about is those micronutrients and those minerals, they don't go when you burn them. They stay in there. And when we use that to make our hominy in the end of the year, what happens is those minerals enhance that corn. It erodes the jacket and enhances that corn and it swells it up. And so without 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 modern technology, people say today that, oh, this is a superfood and this is a superfood. Well, Anishinaabe people have been doing that forever. That hominy is enriched with those micronutrients and that becomes a superfood. Okay. And that comes from that maple tree. And so where we're at, we prefer to use maple wood ash for our corn and our hominy. And it makes our hominy healthy and it makes it delicious. And it makes it incredible for our families to eat. And so those are the three things that had wanted to talk about a little bit here. Um, and I'm really grateful for that tree, and it's benefited me and my family, and it's given us a lot of strength. And sugar was also currency one time a long time ago. It was the currency of the Northwoods, that sugar. So, miigwech.
Miigwech, Greg, and Maria and Marvin for some of those stories. I really appreciate it. So we are at 7 o'clock and we have about 30 minutes left with each other. Um, I think I will ask one more question for our speakers. If you guys could get through them fairly quickly, I do want to open up questions for participants. So if you guys have questions, I'll be opening up that soon. You can put them in the chat and or ask via audio. So I'll ask this last question that I have, and then after the speakers give their answers, we can start to take questions from all of you. So I just wanted to hear from you guys. What message would you share with the next generation of caretakers and harvesters? And is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you wanted to mention before we end our time together? So I can start with Marvin.
The message is love yourself. Be proud of yourself. Be proud of the gifts that we have. I worked with the Head Start children, teaching them maple sugaring, tapping trees. I got the Head Start to close down the Head Start. I said, well, let's go. We'll have school out in the woods. We'll have that. That'll be our Sanabe school out there. Took them little kids out there. That's the best thing. Next generation is having them touch, touch the earth. We're putting the spouts in. We go and collect the sap, add the little mouse up, right by the spout out there. And I really enjoyed the next generation that you say you do that. And I kind of got in trouble that time because I had Head Start school, they couldn't have any candy. I said, what the heck? What do you mean you can't have no candy? Kids love candy. So I had a tree over there, and I made a lollipop tree. I said, yeah, we get syrup, sugar from there. Look at here, it's a lollipop. I snuck out there and I tied a bunch of lollipops on this tree, and the kids came. Oh, that comes out of the branches. I told them. They all went and they all went and grabbed a lollipop, and they weren't supposed to have all that candy, but I kind of sparked them up that day. But the world is changing. The earth is changing, and I've noticed many changes in in how we gather. And I mentioned, holy Christ, it was 80 degrees one time, and I never remember that when I was younger. It was kind of set time and kind of went. The trees went a little slower and stuff, and I you get older like that, you kind of have a little different perspective on things. And when I noticed things changing, I kind of got worried. I kind of got worried. What? How in the heck are we gonna be able to tap maple trees in 50 years? Or 40 years? The way things are, and I kind of made me very sad. Made me very sad. And we evolve. We adapt to things. And I remember my dad telling me he used to feel sorry for. I had about 10 in my family. He used to feel sorry for us because we couldn't take trips. I mean, we're lucky to take a trip to Bad River for a vacation, or go around. We couldn't go, and people were going to Florida vacations, doing this. And he said, "Son, don't worry." He said, "Someday Florida is going to come here." I said, "Holy crap! Someday, it's going to come here." Then he also told me, he said, "Son, you got to learn how to plant pineapples." I said, "What the heck is he doing? What the heck would I want to plant pineapples for?" You know, I mean, I hope there ain't a day where I got to make syrup out of pineapples and there ain't no maple trees. But what I'm saying is we evolve. Don't let all the changes get you down. Place where I live right here in Red Cliff, 8,000 years ago, there used to be a big glacier here. Great big glacier, probably longer than that, 11,000 years, big glacier. And I often think about how in the heck when did the maple trees come on this land? Or when did birch trees come on this land? I mean, a tree didn't grow in the ice, or it evolved into what we see, and how times went, and how the people of the earth, how we survived and how we lived. I mean, did you know you can boil water in birch bark? You can heat up water in birch bark. Before we had metals or we had all these containers or whatever, we make them seamless, and the starch and now got those little baskets that you would put under the tree and cut a little slab, put a little slab of wood in there, and that drop would go in there. So it's kind of like an evolution that throughout our tsunami history that we've gone through. And there's a place over here by Washburn. I mean, we had a tremendous impact on the economy the tsunami did of this area. There's a place over here by Washburn. There's records that way up there they produced, Ojibwe's produced 20,000 tons of maple sugar. 20,000 tons. I said, holy mackerel, that's a lot. That's a lot of tons. So I went over to that place by Washburn. It was up by Tessner's farm. Man, I want to see that place. So I went up there, looked, and it's all farm fields. You know, it's all farm fields now, but at one time it was enormous, enormous, nice sugar maples. And there's a place here up by the ski, we call it the ski hill. Mount Ashwa is good friends with them. Uh, uh, Nana Jubwe Sugar Bush family up there, and they had old remnants up by the ski hill of when our people went up there and made the maple sugar. So, so I just wanted to point out on a little bit of that, even though we got half hour left. Um, and I think the guidance I'd like to share with everybody is get out there and do it. You know, get out there and do it. You know, when I didn't have a great big sugar bush, I just boiled right in my house, tapped the tree outside of my house, boiled right on my stove, boiled right on my stove. But did you know that maple syrup can paint your house? Because one time I was boiling syrup and I had to go to work and I said, wow, I'll leave that right on low at my house. I'll leave it. So I did. And I got to work and I said, I'll come home at noon. I didn't come home at noon and check it. By the time I got home after work, there's smoke billowing coming right out of the house. Goddamn syrup caught on fire on my stove. And about a week before that, I painted my ceiling white. And by the time I got done, my ceiling was brown, you know. So you can paint your house by your syrup. Anyway, I'd like to share that little bit. I'm maybe waiting for the questions to come in. Be great.
Miigwech, Marvin. Maria, you can go next. Yeah, the question was, what message would you like to share with the next generation of caretakers and harvesters? Or is there anything else you want to mention that we haven't discussed yet? Oh, you're on mute, I believe.
Sorry.
All good.
Don't overthink it. Um, and don't think you need all this fancy equipment. And don't be afraid to talk and ask people for advice and help. Uh, I maybe wouldn't ask Marvin. He talks too much. No. Sugar season will be over. No. Marvin has some good stories, and he is a very wise elder, and he knows a lot. Uh, this can be a very expensive hobby or work that we do, and you will not get rich doing this because we all give it away. We give it to friends, family, and community members. And like Marvin and Greg said, people come over and we offer coffee, we offer that maple sugar. It's also a good skill to have. And I'm looking at some of my bullet points, so I'm trying to get through this fast and short here. Um, and it can turn into a job, but it has always been a job. But again, don't be afraid of that hard work. And they kind of hit on it with the wild rice. And we process rice and we process our maple sugar. And there's two things. There's no complaining. You can't complain. If you complain, you get kicked out of the sugar bush and you have to go kind of, go stand by a tree until you can come back because we don't want that bad energy. We don't want that negativity around us, around people, around our medicines, our sap, our syrup. And so, you have to provide that not provide, you have to give that good medicine and give that back to the trees. Um, and with our wild rice operation, we add maple syrup. We make those dishes. But the name of our um, where we process rice, it's called Bickering Canoe, because we my partner and I we are both always think we're right, and so we're called Bickering Canoe, and it's a good thing. We tease each other. Uh, let's see, what else can I talk about is we started with a cold um, steel pan over an open fire. And I don't want to say we got greedy, but we wanted to learn more. And so now we have a $7,000 pan. We have all the fancy equipment, uh, a float box. So uh, we don't paint our house. It stays level, and that sap comes in and stays at the same level. So we don't burn our sap, and I don't paint my ceiling. Um, I remember my grandma did the exact same story Marvin just said. She forgot. She went out, and the whole house was smoky, and um, yeah, her walls were brown as well. Let's see. The other thing is, what responsibilities do people have, and what should we carry when we enter? And that's respect of the tree. It's respect of the people that come and help you. And it's the same as all of our food. Uh, again, no bad energy, and appreciate the gift that the Creator has given us. It is a gift. And put your tobacco down. And then I'm same as Greg and Marvin, is I don't want to go into the stories, but put a spirit plate down. Offer that to the trees, offer that to the animals, offer that. And I will say there, when we offer that plate and put that tobacco down, um, we've seen some things that we can't explain, and I'll kind of leave it at that. And one other thing is Bad River had, well, of course, Bad River, and it was a big, huge timber operation. They came in, they took the trees, and so now you have smaller trees that are straight that they replanted. So they're straight, they're smaller, and the canopy is smaller. Um, and before that happened, we had shorter trees. They were big, they were huge, they provided a lot of sap, and their canopy was large, and it helped protect that tree. And when they came in with their big machines to cut down, that those machines were so heavy that they damaged and they ruined a lot of the roots. And if you ever seen the movie Avatar and how the roots are all connected, all our trees are connected as well. And so our roots they were hurt. And so that connection was lost with those big, heavy equipment, those trees being cut down and made for lumber. Uh, and so there's a little bit of damage, and Greg hit that about, the minerals and the vitamins, and we have to protect them, and we have to still give them thanks. So I have some more things, but I'll let um, Greg go. And so then you have a few minutes to answer questions.
Miigwech, Maria. All right, Greg, you're up next. What message would you like to share with the next generation of caretakers and harvesters, or is there anything else that we haven't mentioned you would like to share?
Yeah, so I remember one time I was it was probably about 10 years into making my own sugar with my family and stuff. And I remember our tribe uh bought a piece of land that was lost earlier in the 50s, um or maybe even before that, when the big land grab happened. And I remember hearing from my grandmother and a few other people that that used to be an amazing sugar bush at one time. And so what happened was our tribe purchased a piece of land on this one peninsula on this place called Fence Lake. So when we went there, we looked at these trees, and you could see they were all big. They were all bigger than my kitchen table, all these maple trees. And there were big bulbs on the bottom of them for where they used to slash those trees. And those trees kind of heal themselves. So we have those trees here on the reservation. Those trees are hundreds of years old, you know, and they were used by our ancestors. So when that land was taken away, there was these big mansions on this point, and they were living amongst the ghosts of our people. They had these big mansions, and they had these big trees that our people would harvest from before that. And so when their leases were up, our tribe had retained all this land again. And so we go back there, and I asked the tribe if I could go back there and make a camp. And they said, yeah, go for it, you know. So it was just maybe like just under maybe 3 acres. And I'll tell you this, I put those buckets in those trees, and I only tapped probably like 20 trees, and I couldn't keep up. Those old trees, how much sap was coming out of them. I couldn't keep up with it. I worked really hard for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I could not keep up with it. And so I learned that the trees that we use today and the trees that our ancestors used, like Marvin was saying, you know, they made 20,000 pounds of sugar. Well, how did they do that? Well, the trees and the land was different, you know, and it was really different because you could get off one tree, you could make as much as 40 trees around you. That's how important that was to have those big old trees like that long ago. And today we wonder how did those people do that, you know, and that's how they did it. They used those big old trees, you know, and there was a lot of water moving on those trees and sap moving up in those trees. So my appreciation for those people a long time ago, it continues to rise because not only did they do all that without axes and metal and all the modern things that we have, they did it with birch bark baskets. They did it with wooden spiles. They did it with stone axes, and they did it with clay, and they did it with all these old methods that are seldom used anymore. And so when you go in the sugar bush, you have to remember those things. You have to remember how it got to that point, how we came to where we are today. So it's important to do that. So it's important to sit when you're in that sugar camp. It's important to listen. It's important to listen to that sap hit the bottom of your bucket when it starts because that signifies something, you know. And I've seen some pretty amazing things uh, when I was out there in the sugar bush by myself. I remember seeing a woodpecker fly up, and he was curious when I tapped one of those big trees. He was looking at that sap dripping out of it, and he was probably wondering what the heck that was, you know. It was a little woodpecker like this, you know. And so what he did was he went up right above it and he started hitting that tree. And so it was really interesting to hear the sound of the sap hitting the pails and then that woodpecker doing this thing, you know. And so it was almost like at one point they were all synchronized. And then I got a song that time. A song had come to me. And so that's one of the songs that we sing over in the sugar bush. But it talks about that bird and he's putting a tree. We're drilling holes in the tree just like that woodpecker does. So we're doing what he does and we're going after that same thing he wants. And we're not the only ones out there that want that sugar. Sometimes deer will come into the camp and they'll drink right out of those pails and they get that medicine. And sometimes those moths, they'll land in there at night and you'll see those when you pull your sap in the morning. Or there'll even be even if it's warm, maybe even Makwal will come in there and you'll see his tracks around in your snow and your in the sugar camp. Or maybe even Jidimo, the squirrels, he'll come in there and he has a drink too, you know. And so um it's important to pay attention when you go to a camp because You know, we can learn things from our elders and our people, but you can also learn things just by paying attention to in the bush. Um, Sitting by that fire that opens up your mind, especially if it's your turn to watch that fire. My advice is don't fall asleep when it's your turn to boil. You don't want to do that, you know. It's happened a few times. It gets so cozy and you're sitting there in the middle of the night and it's cold out and you're just all bundled up. Pretty soon you're dreaming about whatever. And then you open your eyes and you see that just coming right out of your pan. And that's something you don't want to do. So when it's your turn to watch the fire, you got to stay awake. Don't go to sleep, you know. That's my advice for the beginning people. Don't fall asleep. So and then being in Anishinaabe isn't only for your ID. Okay. What you want is you want to be able to do something with your year. Your year is Anishinaabe people. That's even if you it's even if you tap two trees, you know. If you tap two or three trees or 100 trees, it doesn't matter. But that's what we did a long time ago. And that's called being Anishinaabe. Okay. That's part of it. That's just one little part of it, you know. And so when we do those things, it's just like it's just like our people did a long time ago. They left all that for us. That's why it makes us rich. It makes us wealthy. Is because the best stuff will come from your camp. You can go to a store and you can buy a little jar of syrup or whatever, and it's not going to be anything like these other two make too here. You know, they make their own homemade stuff. That's the best stuff in the world. It will never taste anything like what we do as Anishinaabe people. There's nothing better than that. And so when you make it yourself, you are taking something from nature and with your intention and you're making something, okay? And I heard that from the other two speakers here. They talk about gifts, you know, and that's important. That's an important part of being able to have the gift of making sugar and making syrup. That's the other magical side of it is when you give it to somebody, you know that the life that tree gave you, you put your life into it, and now it's going to benefit somebody else. And that's the most important part of being a sugar producer is what you give away. And you can't forget that. You got to give away what you make. You got to give some of that away. You can't hoard it all. And so it's important to hear that too. You got to be able to give that away. And the first piece of sugar you make, that's got to go back in the bush. You can't keep that. You can't eat that. The first taste doesn't go to you, it goes back into the forest. That's what we were taught over here. And so sharing that is the most important part of being a producer is sharing it. And so that's my 2 cents. So be good.
Big Witch Greg. All right.
Would
Yeah.
I be able to just say some other stuff here?
Of course, go ahead, Maria.
Over the years, I have learned several other things. And it's pure maple syrup that you can make other things. And one is like a sugar daddy and put a stick down and you only get it to a certain temperature and you run this long string on top of the snow and then you take that stick and you roll it along. And that's another gift for the kids and they enjoy that. Uh, Another one is I make maple cream and it's amazing. It's so smooth and these are all different things. I make maple sugar cake candies, which is a little softer, and the maple sugar that we've been talking about. And you can even go farther to make the hard candy. And when I know they were talking about moths, they like to eat that. And that's when I kind of know end of season is done. The sap gets kind of milky and then you're done. And I'm always torn because then the fish run, just like the other two. But the day that syrup, the maple syrup, or excuse me, the day the maple sap starts getting cloudy and milky and the moths are in there, I go straight into the next day. It's magical. It's like the trees know, and I make maple or birch sap, and I make that into birch syrup, and that's a whole nother topic. But that is a amazing medicine. So that's for another time, another story. So I'll let it go to the participants for questions.
Miigwech, Maria. Yeah, so we have two questions in the chat, and we are at 7:28, and I just want to respect everyone's time. So we can get through these questions pretty quick. That would be great. Somebody was asking about if does anybody know about the minerals in the syrup slash sugar that have nutrients that could potentially make your bones stronger? Misty Jackson is wondering this.
That'd be a Greg Johnson question. He talked about that a little bit. Go ahead, Greg. I know you know the
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah, there's calcium under the ground all the time, and that calcium comes from a lot of different things. And once it gets into your sugar. What, and this is the thing I don't understand is if you go and you get that Chmokumans in the buck with that white man sugar, it's super filtered, and they use Puma stones and they use all this stuff, these bags, and they get rid of that. But what we do is we leave a little bit of that in there. We maybe filter it a few times, but it isn't like we don't want to void that out. We don't want to not have that. So when you put that in your rice is already a superfood, but when you add all that in there with the micronutrients and all the great things, it becomes like a superfood then. And so there's so many things that are in the ground mineral wise that are good for you. And so yeah, it's definitely in there. So again, when you take that sugar and that syrup, it's always best to get it from a local producer, somebody close to you, um, and something that's not so filtered. So yeah, that's a good question. That's important to understand that.
All right, Miigwech. We can go to the next question. I see Derek has his hand up. And real quick, sorry, Derek, I'm just gonna say what's going on in the chat here. I just put some links in for everyone to check out the upcoming events going on. All right, sorry to interrupt you, Derek. Go ahead.
Thank you all for the stories. Yeah, I was kind of wondering a little bit about the sugar sand. I think they call it like niter or something like that. Does that have like any cultural significance? I know it's like very nutrients dense, but was there anything like specific we would kind of do with that? Do you know?
Derek, that's a tobacco question.
Oh,
I give it back to the earth. And I like my syrup on pancakes, so I'm a little particular and I strain it out with a diaper or cheesecloth and I give it back to the trees and I take that dark syrup. So um and there's there is some nutrients in it, but just my grandkids, my kids, we give it back.
miigwech. Ni we've to kujige same mom in a while.
All right, Miigwech, Derek. And then there is one more question here. I know we're over time, but I'll just go ahead and ask you guys quick if you're all right with that. What things do you look for when you know it's time to tap, to start or stop tapping?
Oh my, I'm gonna just jump in. My grandpa is breathing down my neck here because he wants me to talk. and that's what started out who taught me how to. And I was going to mention that, but I'm kind of reminded by that question. What he used to tell me, what he used to tell me when time to tap the tree, he said that Mamie Gracie, or not Mamie Gracie, that what's that red-headed woodpecker? Did I say that right? The
Mimi,
red-headed wood, huh?
Mimi.
Mamie, not Mamie Gracie, Mamie, Mamie would tell him that woodpecker would go out, and most of the time, just start tapping the trees. Most of the time, when I go and start tapping the trees, like Greg mentioned, that woodpecker, that Mamie is tapping the trees. Of course, you got to have it warm, certain temperature. When I notice that the trees will start running, what you also have to have is it has to freeze at night. It's got to be cold, freeze. If it freezes at night, that sap runs better than when it's warm. So, so those are things I look for. And when you quit, certainly that's what Maria mentioned too. You know, that turns real milky and yellow, and and that's time to quit. But I think the most important thing here in Redcliffe, what we do is have a feast. We have a feast for that tree, and we invite in other people who have sugar bushes or tap trees or whatever to participate in our feast. So that's one of the things we do before we start. Me, you, me, quit.
Miigwech, Marvin, Maria or Greg, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, if you really want to know when tap a trees, you just call Marvin up. He'll tell you when. No, he had really good points on his response there. Nature will tell you. There's also a ring that comes out, melts away from that tree. That'll tell you when it's about that time. Even that's kind of deceiving sometimes too, especially in these recent years where you know um climate change and global warming is a real thing. And so when I first started, the snow was deep. You couldn't even you could you had to do what Marvin does. You got to walk around with snowshoes, and then you got to work really hard to bust those trails, and you don't really have to do that so much anymore, um, unless there's a big dump that's going to happen of snow when you're doing your camp. And so those telltale signs with the snow and the ice melting away from the tree, that's something that's becoming seldom seen now, especially down this way. We're a little south of you guys, Bad River and Misquabbacong. And so sometimes unless you're in a heavy canopy, it's going to be really difficult to see those little signs. Um, yeah, and so as the earth changes, our methods are gonna change too when it comes to being a producer of Anishinaabe Zinzibaakwid Abu and Anishinaabe Zinzibaakwid. Um, you just have to really watch your surroundings, because I have friends that were posting online that there are maple trees in Montana right now. They must have a different type of climate, but they're already budding out right now over there in Montana. And then I have friends down by Detroit that are beginning to get their camps ready. So it all depends on your region, your latitude where you're at, and yeah, what region you're in. I guess that plays an important part of determining whether or not you're going to be sapping soon or not. So
Um, I'd just like to jump in. Uh, for the question is, and Marvin hit on it, but you have to 32, you want it lower. You want it that cold, 19, 18, 20 degrees, and you need it to get back up for the sap to run. you need it to be higher than 32. So when it hits 34, 35, the sap will run. But if it doesn't, say it's 33 degrees and at night it stays at 31, the sap won't run that day. So you need it above and below in order for your sap. And if it stays below and it doesn't turn to that above 32, your trees won't run either. And the most important thing is enjoy it, have fun, make sure you are having your kids and your grandkids with you. And that's extremely important too.
The other thing I do is I tells me when to tell. I watch the weatherman in the morning on TV. No, and I just want to confirm what Maria is saying. Also, it's the weather. It's that whole weather. That's the trick. That's the trick of that whole thing. What she is saying. But and everything I really like what Greg said too is a lot of the teachers is out in the woods, out in the bush. You can learn. Watch those things. Watch those little signs. Watch what things. And whatever you do, don't tell anybody you collected that sap when you found a mouse in the bucket. Don't tell no one. Just take the mouse out. They won't even know. Take that mouse out and throw it in there. They won't even know. Don't tell anyone you did that. So, of course, I'm kidding, but
All right, miigwech, everyone. We are over our time, so I would like to just thank everybody for joining us today. Miigwech to our amazing speakers. Thank you so much for joining us. Um, and yeah, I guess I will open it up to the speakers if there's anything else you guys want to leave us off with before we sign off today.
yeah, I want to say something. Give me another half hour. No, I'm just kidding. No, I just want to tell everybody I love you all. To me, this session, the work we do, it's kind of like watching it. It's kind of like watching Bad Bunny at the halftime show. I really enjoy this, and I just got a challenge for everybody who's listening. Everybody who's listening online here, take some time and find a child or a young person and teach them something about the about the maple tree. Maybe it's even something that we said here tonight. But take some time. Everybody here, it could be your grandkid, your cousin, maybe somebody somebody who doesn't have any parents, maybe, or something like that. Go and grab them. Go and grab them and teach them something about the maple tree. If you have access to maple equipment or whatever, tap a tree with them. Even if it's one. Even if it's one, we all live in a place where you could go out. I mean, I was even in the city of Bayfield tapping the trees around Bayfield one year. I wasn't supposed to, but went and did it. So that's the last thing I'd like to uh, uh, challenge everybody to take some time take some time in this world. I mean, you could go out in the world and you could beat a Bad Bunny. you know, you could teach them, and that's one thing. I think it's experiencing it, and that that's what I would encourage everybody to do.
Miigwech, Marvin. Maria or Greg, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I guess I just want to say miigwech for letting me participate tonight. And like Marvin, I'm just full of love for everybody. And it's important to, like he said, take your relatives out, take your family out, make sure that you put your nephews to work. Okay,
Right?
your nephews are there for a reason. You got to make them You got to put them in work. So when my nephews come over to my house, I say, "Hey, there's something for you to do outside here, and you got to put them to work, put those nephews to work." Miigwech.
Um, and I would just like to say real fast, uh, even if you tap that one tree, you don't have to make syrup. You can take it right into the house in a quart jar and just drink it. There's nutrients in there. So you don't have to have that fancy equipment to enjoy what that gift the maple tree does. And uh like Marvin with the Nuagos, and he has to get that extra pint. I love you mostest. How's that? So no, I love you too. But anyway, just wanted to say that.
I was gonna tell
Miigwech.
the I was gonna tell the organizer, Miigwech for pulling this together. It's a good session. But if you invite us back again, there's an old traditional saying that I used to do that when I went down to Waskaganick. When I'm talking, they say, "Holy Christ, Marvin, you talk so damn much." They put a banana out there, and they talk so much that that banana would turn brown. Banana would turn brown. So I do that trick when I go down to Lac de Flabba. So next time we get together, just get a banana. Don't go by the clock. Don't go by the clock. When that banana turns brown, then we're done.
All right, good to note, Marvin. I see Rob Kroll also noted that in the chat. He said Marvin's
Did
banana
he?
isn't brown yet. Keep going. So,
Oh, that's his pot
yeah,
liquor.
we will for sure try to make some more time then for next time we do this. So, miigwech everybody for your knowledge and for sharing and for spreading all of that love. It's really, really nice to see. So, miigwech everyone for joining. I am going to end the recording and I hope you guys all have a wonderful night. Thank you.